It's August 1990. The late afternoon sun hangs low over London, but in the back streets around the Den, it's anything but mellow. A surge of Scottish visitors has made its way down from Edinburgh, led by the Capital City Service, the infamous CCS. Their reputation precedes them: street fights, ambushes, bold entries into English turf. They'd planned to travel en masse, but Edinburgh police intervened. The hired coaches were cancelled at short notice. Undeterred, the Hibs boys improvised. Trains, planes, taxis, the lot. Swift, half-planned, chaotic. They met up in a pub off Oxford Street, the Hog in the Pound. From there, they funneled toward New Cross via the tube. By the time they stepped out near New Cross Station, the atmosphere was charged. Plainclothes police were already stirring, trying to pick off stragglers. For the CCS, this was the moment. London, enemy territory, a chance to show they could travel, fight, and leave their mark. Outside a pub on New Cross Road, as they closed in, confronting locals and Millwall supporters, the powder keg lit, windows smashed, cars vandalized, someone overturned a vehicle in the car park, timber planks ripped from fencing, wielded as makeshift weapons. All this as the Hibs contingent pushed toward the Den for what should have been a friendly with Millwall. It was anything but friendly. Inside the ground, the tension hadn't eased. The away end filled with Hibs boys. Across the way, Millwall's crowd hovered, watching, waiting. The match acted as backdrop, a stage on which something else was being played out: reputation, challenge, territory. And so we begin our story. A Scottish gang descending on South London, a southern club with a fearsome reputation. No grand announcement, just the unpredictable collision of two sets of lads and one rigged afternoon in August. Now you've got to remember, this wasn't just any pre-season friendly. Back in those days, Millwall still carried that fierce reputation. Coldblow Lane wasn't a place for the faint-hearted, even when nothing was going off. And Hibs, well, the Capital City Service, were one of Scotland's most notorious mobs. Born in the early 80s, modelled on the English casual culture, designer clobber, swagger, and a taste for confrontation. By the time the decade turned, they'd seen action all over Scotland, but this was something else. Word had gone round that Hibs had lined up a friendly with Millwall at the Den. To most fans, just another summer fixture, but to the firms, it was an opportunity, a test of bottle, and a statement of intent. Now, the CCS had planned to go big, coaches booked, lads ready, buzzing, but then, at the last minute, the Edinburgh police got wind of it. They turned up at the pub where the Hibs lads were gathering, told the drivers the trip was off, and just like that, the official plan was dead in the water. But this was the late 80s, early 90s. You didn't just shrug and go home. Nah, the word went round quick. We're still going. Make your own way down. Trains, cars, whatever. We're doing it. And that's exactly what they did. Dozens of small groups, some flying, some on the train, a few in borrowed motors, all converging on London with one purpose: represent Hibs, make noise, and see what the London scene was really about. By early afternoon, a good few hundred had gathered in the Hog in the Pound, just off Oxford Street. Imagine the scene. Scottish voices echoing round the pub, Stone Island and Burberry everywhere, the adrenaline building. There's no mobiles back then, no WhatsApp groups, no internet, just word of mouth and instinct. And by all accounts, the Hibs boys were buzzing. Nervous, yeah, but excited. They knew the risks. Everyone knew the reputation Millwall had built. The Bushwackers, one of the most dangerous firms in England. Still, there was a sense of, this is it. A chance to prove that the Scots could hold their own in London. Later that afternoon, they piled onto the Underground, Oxford Circus to New Cross Gate, heading deeper into South London territory. Some might have thought it'd be a quiet stroll to the ground, but anyone who knew Millwall knew that wasn't how things worked around there. As soon as the Hibs lads spilled out of the station, plainclothes police were already waiting, snatching a few off the street, but there were too many to stop. The main mob pressed on toward the Crown and Anchor, one of Millwall's most notorious pubs. That's when things turned. Windows went in, bottles flew, locals scrambled, someone turned a car on its side, car alarms wailing in the summer air. A few of the locals fought back, others legged it. For a few wild minutes, it was chaos, a flash of violence that ripped through New Cross like a thunderclap. The old Bill moved in quickly, of course, trying to contain it, but by then, the scene was already set. The word spreading fast that a massive mob from Scotland had landed and were causing trouble right outside the Den. For the Hibs lot, this was it. Their moment of notoriety. They'd done the impossible, travelled hundreds of miles, right into one of the hardest bits of London, and taken the fight straight to Millwall's doorstep. But the story wasn't finished, because inside the ground the atmosphere was building. The Millwall boys, many of whom hadn't even realised Hibs were coming down, were now riled up, and they wanted payback. And when that final whistle blew, the streets outside Coldblow Lane would turn into something else entirely. You see, Millwall in 1990 weren't the sort of club to let something like that slide. Their firm, the Bushwackers, were one of the most feared outfits in England. They'd seen off West Ham, Chelsea, Spurs, you name it. And here were these lads from Edinburgh strolling round South London like they owned it. To the Millwall faithful, that was an insult that needed an answer. As the second half kicked off inside the ground, groups of Millwall lads began assembling outside the away end. Pockets of locals, scarves tucked away, faces hard as nails. And when the final whistle blew, the police, bless them, tried to form a cordon to get the Hibs support safely to the tube, but there was no holding back what came next. The first clash was sudden, two mobs colliding head-on outside the away turnstiles. Punches flying, bottles smashing, boots and fists everywhere. Some lads have said it felt like a wall of noise, pure chaos, screaming, sirens, and the crunch of bodies against metal barriers. The CCS were outnumbered, but they weren't backing down. For 5, maybe 10 minutes, it was pure toe-to-toe. No running, no hiding, just pride and adrenaline. A few got nicked, a few bloodied. One off-duty Scottish copper who'd followed them down even got caught in the melee. It was mayhem, the sort of running battle that summed up that era of football to a T. Eventually, the police forced the Hibs lads back, trying to funnel them toward New Cross Gate Station. You can picture it. Hundreds of Scots singing, still buzzing from the fight, getting pelted with bottles as they were escorted away. Millwall's mob shadowed them for a while, but the sheer weight of police numbers kept it from turning into something far worse. In the end, both sides claimed the bragging rights. The Hibs boys said they'd proved their point, that they could travel hundreds of miles south, take on one of England's hardest, and walk away with respect. And the Millwall lads, well, they took pride in the idea that nobody comes into their patch and gets away clean. A week later, the Evening Standard ran a classified ad, "Congratulations Hibs, on a job well done, West Ham ICF." A cheeky nod from another London firm, showing a bit of respect to the Scots who dared to tread where few would. But make no mistake, Millwall hadn't forgotten. For years after, that day in 1990 was still spoken about on both sides of the border. And you know what? Whether you agree with it or not, you can't deny one thing. That era of football violence was real, raw, unpredictable, and, in its own way, a big part of the game's history. When the dust finally settled on that hot August afternoon, South London looked like a battlefield. Broken glass littered the pavements, the smell of smoke and stale beer hung in the air, and the police, battered, exhausted, were still sweeping up the stragglers. In total, dozens were arrested, mostly Hibs supporters, though a fair few Millwall lads got lifted too. Reports vary, but it's thought that anywhere from 30 to 50 arrests were made that day. No deaths, thankfully, but plenty of blood, plenty of bruises, and one overturned car that made the front pages of the Evening Standard. Back in Edinburgh, word spread fast. The pubs around Leith and Easter Road were buzzing. The older lads nodded with approval. The young ones listened wide-eyed to the story of the Battle of the Den. The Bushwackers would remember it, and for years afterward, Hibs' name was spoken with a mix of grudging respect and unfinished business. Police, meanwhile, were fuming. The match had been classed as low risk. They'd expected a handful of rowdy fans, not the chaos that ensued. Afterward, there were meetings in Scotland Yard, mutterings in the press about cross-border coordination and intelligence failures. But truth be told, there wasn't much they could have done. It was the pre-mobile era. No WhatsApp, no Telegram chats, no CCTV networks watching every move. When the CCS decided to travel, they just went. And that really is what made it so legendary. When you talk to the lads who were there, they'll tell you straight. It wasn't clever, and it certainly wasn't glamorous, but it was real. And in that strange, twisted world of terrace culture, respect was earned the hard way, with your boots, your bottle, and your willingness to show up. In a world that's since been sanitized, corporate, polished to the bone, there's something undeniably raw about that era, for better or worse. The passion, the energy, the tribal loyalty, it came from a place of working class identity, of lads who lived for Saturday, who wore their club on their chest and their postcode on their sleeve. Today, football's a different animal. The violence is gone, but the passion, that still burns, just in a different way. You see it in the songs, in the flags, in the way people still talk about the old grounds, the old firms, the old ways. Those stories, like that day down at Coldblow Lane, have become folklore now, handed down in pubs and forums, told with a mix of pride and disbelief. Can you believe we did that? Even the old faces, the ones who've settled down, kids grown, mortgages paid, they still smile when they talk about it. Not because of the punches thrown or the windows smashed, but because of what it meant. It was their youth, their tribe, their time, and deep down, they know they were part of something that will never happen again. When you strip away the mayhem, the headlines, the arrests, what's left is history. A raw, unfiltered chapter in the story of British football culture. A reminder that football was once about more than TV rights and Instagram posts. It was about belonging. And whether you were standing on the slopes of Easter Road or the terraces of Coldblow Lane, that feeling, that fire, it's something that will never really die.